Gerald states that New York has changed a lot in the past many years. He says that people don't recognize true art when they see it, and young people believe that the only place to find love is by confessing to your lover in the rain. Gerald says that New York is no longer what it used to be, as the soul it once had in it is no longer there. Thomas is another individual who feels the same. He is in love with a woman named Mimi, but it is completely one-sided. Both of them are at an art gallery, where Mimi says that she might be leaving New York for good, for further studies. Thomas can't fully comprehend her decision, as she is the only thing he has figured out in this city. Mimi says that both of them aren't in a true relationship, even if they happen to spend one romantic night together, when Mimi's boyfriend was out of the city. Thomas still believes that Mimi would eventually come back to him. Mimi always thought Thomas to be lifeless, boring to love, and a man who was without a mystery, just like the current New York. Thomas felt the same about himself. Thomas returns to the building where he is residing, and meets Gerald for the very first time. He has moved right next to Thomas. When Thomas is collecting his mail, Gerald finds him to be a bit stressed. Trying to strike up a friendly conversation, Gerald asks Thomas if something is bothering him. Thomas tells Gerald about Mimi, and how he actually loves her. Upon asking more about her, Thomas refuses to tell him more and heads to his apartment. Gerald tells Thomas he can come to him if he feels like taking some stress off his chest. Although hesitant to do so, an anxious Thomas heads to Gerald. Thomas tells Gerald about how he met Mimi at a bookstore, and fell in love with her at first sight. Mimi has a boyfriend who is in a music band, and is out of the city for a tour, which is the reason how Thomas and Mimi got to spend one romantic night together. Mimi is still not that serious about Thomas. When told that Mimi is just 22 years old, Gerald lets Thomas know that Mimi is at an age where a person's defensive mechanisms are extremely strong. Gerald says that a human being is highly unpredictable, and you can never guess a person's next move. Gerald advises that Thomas should make Mimi feel afraid of something other than him, which would let her come closer to him. Thomas attends a dinner party at his family's home. Thomas's father, Ethan, highly disapproves of Thomas not getting his life on track, while Thomas's mother, Judith, is mentally unstable. Thomas tutors students for some extra cash, and he has dropped out of college as well. Thomas and Mimi are at a bar, where Thomas reveals to Mimi about Gerald, and how both of them are friends now. Thomas notices that his father has arrived with another beautiful woman in the bar. At first, Thomas doesn't pay much attention to it, as he believes that the woman might be from his father's firm. But he is forced to rethink soon, when Ethan shares an intimate moment with that woman. Thomas tells Mimi that his father's affair won't do any favors for his mother, and won't end well for everyone. Mimi advises Thomas to not think much about it, but Thomas lets Mimi know that his father never cared about him. Mimi says that Thomas has his own worries, and he should not be adding more. When Thomas gets near to kiss Mimi, she refuses to take the moment much further. Thomas uses Gerald's advice, and tells Mimi that her defense mechanism is highly strong, which is why Mimi is reluctant to Thomas's advances, even though she wants them. Mimi tells Thomas that he is completely confused. Thomas thinks that he can never be highly successful like his father, and can never get a beautiful woman like the one his father was with at the bar. Thomas has lunch with his father, with the intention of finding out who that woman was. His father tells him that he wants Thomas to come out from the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and live with his family. Ethan wants Thomas to be with his mother more. Ethan says that he has tried to make Judith quit smoking, but she refuses to do so. Thomas believes that even a small thing could create a terrible situation in his family. Thomas can't get enough courage to ask his father about the other woman. Ethan tells Thomas that he has set up Thomas's appointment with a career counselor, in hopes of fixing his career. Gerald asks Thomas if he is going to confront his father about his affair. He further asks Thomas about his mother. Thomas says that his mother came from a broken family, and has been depressed for many years. She also happens to have a bipolar personality, and reacts in an erratic manner whenever something threatens their perfect family. Ethan has his own publishing firm, but hasn't been able to create an interesting fictional story to put out. Thomas always loved to write, but when his father disapproved of it, as he saw no future in the field of publishing, Thomas began to keep his stories to himself. Thomas and Mimi spy on the woman Ethan has been seeing. When Thomas is spying alone, he follows the woman everywhere she goes. During this entire process, Thomas begins to have feelings for the woman, even though he doesn't fully express them. He also begins to appreciate the woman's beautiful appearance more. Gerald asks what is Thomas trying to accomplish from all of this. Thomas replies that he wants to know more about this woman, and wants her to stop seeing his father, so that none of this affects her mother's mental health and deteriorates his family. Gerald doesn't believe a single word from Thomas, as he thinks that there might be more to his motive behind all of this. Thomas finally musters up the courage to confront the woman. The name of the woman is Johanna, and she is already familiar with Thomas, as Ethan keeps a picture of Thomas in his office. She is also aware that Thomas happens to be following her wherever she goes. Thomas and Johanna sit down at a restaurant, where Thomas asks her how long she has been seeing Ethan, to which she replies that they both have been together for about a year now. Johanna is a freelance editor and also works with Ethan sometimes. When asked if she plans on taking Ethan away from Judith, Johanna says that she believes that Judith might be giving her husband away due to her poor mental health. The entire conversation takes a weird turn when Johanna accuses Thomas of actually wanting to be intimate with her, which Thomas completely denies. Thomas helps Judith in cleaning some of her stuff. When the entire mess starts to bother her, her smoking habit kicks in and she rushes to get a cigarette. Even though her life is completely falling apart, Judith tells her son that she actually loves him. Not wanting her mother to fall into a much darker place, Thomas meets Johanna once again and asks the real reason for her seeing his father when she could get anyone with her charm and looks. Johanna also tries to flirt with Thomas, but Thomas wants her to stop everything that has been going on, as her mother is in a fragile state. When Ethan and Johanna were just working together, Ethan thought about the idea of leaving Judith. Johanna thought of it as an opportunity and felt needy, which is why she decided to start an affair with Ethan. With Thomas now being involved, Johanna feels more confident than ever in this peculiar situation. While they are buying groceries, Thomas tells Gerald about his conversation with Johanna. Gerald asks if Thomas has any intention of getting intimate with Johanna. Thomas repeatedly replies no, but Gerald doesn't believe Thomas. Upon asking a few more times, Thomas confesses that he does want to get close to Johanna. Thomas attends a marriage ceremony of his friend with Mimi, where he surprisingly bumps into Johanna, who has arrived with another man. Thomas is furious as he thinks that Johanna might be with multiple men at the same time. When asked who the man is, Johanna says that he is a friend and is gay. Johanna says that Thomas doesn't really know how the world works and is actually stupid. Johanna walks away and Thomas makes vulgar comments at her. Johanna explains herself and says in her defense that she is not seeing anyone other than Ethan. Thomas makes an unexpected advance toward her and kisses her. Initially surprised, Johanna kisses him back passionately. Mimi and Thomas leave the wedding, and Thomas has begun an affair of his own with Johanna. Thomas and Johanna are enjoying their romantic time together. Thomas is getting late for the appointment his father has set up with the career counselor, but he is way too busy with Johanna. Johanna knows Thomas more than he could have ever imagined. Johanna lets Thomas know that his father keeps most of Thomas's essays and prized possessions from his college days in his office. Thomas tells Johanna that he always wanted to become a writer, something his father never approved of. Thomas further adds that when he presented one of the essays he wrote to his father deemed it as serviceable. Johanna wishes to read some of Thomas's work. Thomas gives Gerald some of his essays to read, which he praises a lot and says that Thomas has a knack for writing good stories. Thomas tells Gerald that he might be falling in love with Johanna. He asks Gerald if he has ever fallen in love, to which Gerald replies that he has, but all of it ended up in a mess. Thomas says that he feels that, in hindsight, all of this would end up being not good for anyone involved. Ethan calls Thomas into his office, and Thomas worries that his father might have found out about him being with Johanna. Thomas is relieved that it was about Thomas not showing up at the appointment with the career counselor. Ethan proposes that Thomas should join his publishing firm, as he might be a good fit in the company. Thomas enters Gerald's apartment and finds an unfinished copy of a new book titled The Only Living Boy in New York, written by Julian Stellers. Julian is actually Gerald, who happens to be a successful writer and has published about 12 books. Gerald is still not known by many people, as he has kept his personal life a secret. Thomas wonders why a successful man like Gerald wishes to spend time with a man like Thomas, who hasn't accomplished much in his life. When asked if Thomas is the only living boy in New York, Gerald replies that he in fact is. Thomas is at Johanna's apartment, and he wants her to read some of his essays, but he can't seem to find her there. He later learns that she is actually on a romantic date with Ethan. Mimi asks Thomas if he has ever been romantic with Johanna. Even though Mimi never approved of Thomas and has never seriously considered having a relationship with him, she seems to be getting jealous and nervous over the thought of Thomas ever getting intimate with Johanna. She asks Thomas if he has ever made romantic advances toward Johanna, to which Thomas lies that he hasn't. While they are having a romantic moment with each other, Thomas insists on knowing more about Johanna, as she hasn't fully revealed herself to Thomas. She lets Thomas know that she grew up in London with a troubled father, who ended up putting himself down for good. She came to America later on, and has lived in Brooklyn for the most part. When asked if she does care about Thomas and Ethan, Johanna says that she has never cared for most people in her life. Even though she won't admit it, Johanna does seem to care about Thomas and Ethan. Johanna is aware that her relationship with Ethan and Thomas is becoming a mess, and she has to do something about it before it becomes too late. Gerald says that Thomas and Ethan are plagued by the same disease, which is Johanna. Thomas asks why Gerald is writing about him. Gerald says that he loves to write about those who reveal themselves to him. Thomas did the exact same, and Gerald has now written almost 100 pages on him. Thomas invites Gerald to a party which is being thrown by his father's publishing firm. Thomas believes that it might be good for Gerald's new book, as he might need a publisher to release it. Gerald appreciates Thomas's invitation and says that he would think about it. The next night, Thomas picks Mimi up for the party. Mimi reveals that she has officially broken up with her boyfriend. Thomas doesn't show much excitement over this news, as he would have prior to meeting Johanna in his life. Johanna is all Thomas is thinking about right now. Both of them reach the event, where Thomas introduces Mimi to his mother. Gerald is also present at the event. Thomas is elated that he has shown up at the party, and Gerald appreciates the beauty of Thomas's mother. Thomas wants her mother to meet Gerald, but he seems to have left a bit early. Johanna is on the roof, and Gerald goes to meet her. Johanna asks Gerald if he has ever met her, to which Gerald says that he hasn't, but he surely knows who Johanna is. Gerald hints at how Johanna is having fun with Thomas, which makes her feel uneasy. As she doesn't want to have strange conversations, Johanna goes back inside. She takes Thomas aside and proposes that they should stop seeing each other for the rest of their lives. Thomas doesn't want this to happen, as he has begun to love Johanna. Johanna breaks the news that Ethan has proposed to her for marriage, and she has accepted it. A heartbroken Thomas doesn't believe a single word, and asks Johanna how could she just accept the marriage proposal amidst all of what's going on. Johanna believes that it might be best for everyone involved. Not wanting to lie to his father, Thomas decides to tell his father everything. But seeing how he is actually happy with Judith, he refuses not to tell him just yet. Thomas goes outside, and Mimi follows him as she senses that something might be wrong. Now that she is single, she asks if Thomas wants to leave New York with her and move to a different place. As much as Thomas really wants to, he doesn't want to ruin Mimi's life as well. He discloses that he was having an affair with Johanna behind Mimi's back. Mimi is taken aback by the news and leaves, but not before saying that Thomas is like the rest of the horrible men. Thomas decides to sleep at his parents' house that night, and when he wakes up, he tells his mother that he wants to leave New York so badly. Her mother thinks that all of this might be related to Mimi, but Thomas doesn't want to disclose anything that could drive Judith into a much darker place. He asks for his father, and Judith says that Ethan is at his office. Thomas musters up some courage and decides to reveal everything to Ethan before he could marry Johanna. He heads to his office, and he finds Johanna there as well. Johanna tries to stop him, but Thomas is able to reach his father's office before her. Ethan is surprised to see Thomas and Johanna together. When asked if both of them know each other, Johanna lies that Thomas had been following her. Thomas stops her from telling more lies and reveals that both of them had an affair with each other. Ethan can't fully process what he had just heard and gets enraged at Thomas, but he breaks down in tears as he can't believe that his own son has done something convoluted like this. He leaves the office, and Johanna gets upset as well. Thomas apologizes to Johanna, but Johanna says that all of them should be sorry. Before she could leave as well, she hands out one of Thomas's sports news articles to him that Ethan had kept in his office. Much to his astonishment, he finds Gerald in the background of the picture that is in the article, which is many years old. Thomas rushes to Gerald's apartment and finds no one there. He finds out that Gerald is at a cafe. He confronts Gerald and asks him about the story of his latest book, while handing him the news article with their picture in it. It turns out that the story of the book is actually about Gerald's relationship with Thomas's parents. Gerald was a close friend of Ethan and Judith, and when he found out that Ethan wasn't capable of having children, all of them decided that Gerald should help out with the pregnancy of Judith. Gerald loved Judith and is the biological father of Thomas. Gerald chose not to see Judith, which eventually became the reason for Judith's unstable mental health, as she too loved Gerald. Gerald always wanted to be around Thomas, which he now has for the past many weeks. Both of them are happy to know what kind of relationship they have with each other. Thomas returns home to find out that his mother knows about Ethan's affair with Johanna, and she is okay with it. Judith reveals that she didn't want to create problems in Thomas's life, which is why she didn't tell him about Gerald. 1 year later, Ethan and Judith are divorced, and Thomas is running his own bookstore, where he is also selling the newly released The Only Living Boy in New York. Ethan arrives at the shop to buy his copy of the book. When he talks about the characters in this book with Thomas, Thomas reveals that his favorite character is that of Ethan, as he was the father who never ran away. Both of them reconcile, and Ethan reveals that he is still in touch with Johanna. Judith has recovered from her poor mental health and is back with Gerald, who reads his new book to a group of avid book readers. Thomas is more than satisfied with his life and family now.